But what if, deep within the foundations of this grand cathedral, in the dark, unvisited corners, there are objects that simply don't belong? Artifacts that have no label because they defy every category we have created. What happens when a discovery is made that doesn't fit the blueprint? An object so out of place, so far out of time, that its very existence threatens to bring the entire carefully constructed edifice crashing down. The story of humanity is presented to us as a grand stone edifice, a cathedral of knowledge, built brick by brick, fact by fact, over centuries of careful scholarship. Its architecture seems flawless, its logic unassailable. Each hallway is perfectly lit, each exhibit meticulously labeled. We see the slow, steady climb of our ancestors, from the flint spear to the first embers of civilization, to the sprawling empires of antiquity, and finally, to us. It is the story of linear progress, a predictable, comforting tale that tells us precisely who we are and where we have come from. It is the story that is taught in our schools, printed in our textbooks, and displayed in our museums. These are the whispers that echo through the halls of forbidden archaeology. A gear-driven device of impossible complexity pulled from an ancient shipwreck. A map showing a continent that wouldn't be discovered for centuries, its coastline free of ice. A stone monolith carved with a precision that even our modern technology would struggle to replicate. On their own, they are curiosities, anomalies to be dismissed or explained away. But when viewed together, they begin to paint a different picture entirely. A picture of a past far more advanced, far more mysterious, and perhaps far older than we have ever been told. It suggests that our steady climb may not have been a climb at all, but rather a recovery, an ascent from the ruins of something magnificent that came before. A forgotten epoch of mankind whose greatest achievements have been erased by the sands of time. This is the story of those cracks in the foundation and the shocking discoveries they reveal. We will journey to the very edge of the historical record and beyond it. We will examine the evidence that powerful forces may have tried to keep hidden, evidence that threatens the very narrative of our past. And in doing so, we must begin by asking the most fundamental question of all. Is our history a lie? To find the answer, we must first travel back, not just thousands, but tens of thousands of years, to a time when, according to our textbooks, history itself was not supposed to exist.
In the remote, rolling hills of southeastern Anatolia, under the vast and unforgiving Turkish sky, lies a secret that slept for 12 millennia. For generation after generation, local farmers walked these lands, their plows occasionally striking great buried stones, which they dismissed as little more than ancient grave markers. They called the place Göbekli Tepe, the belly pot hill. It was an unassuming feature in a landscape of endless dusty plains, a place that held its breath, waiting. It wasn't until 1994, when the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt cast his expert eye upon the hill, that humanity began to understand that this was no ordinary place. What he uncovered there did not just challenge a few footnotes in our history books. It detonated the very timeline of human civilization itself. Beneath the soil of Potbelly Hill lay a breathtaking arrangement of monolithic stone circles. Immense T-shaped pillars, some standing 20 feet tall and weighing up to 50 tons, were arranged in precise, ritualistic patterns. They are colossal, otherworldly, and covered in exquisitely carved reliefs of fearsome animals. Snarling foxes, wild boars, graceful cranes, and venomous serpents all writhing across the stone surfaces. This is, without question, the oldest temple in the world. But that simple statement is perhaps the greatest understatement in all modern archaeology.
To understand the sheer impossibility of Göbekli Tepe, we must first recall the story we have always been told. The official narrative of human history is built upon a revolutionary turning point, the agricultural revolution. Around 10,000 years ago, we are told, humanity began the slow process of domesticating plants and animals. This shift from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to settled farming communities was the great catalyst. Agriculture created food surpluses, which allowed for larger populations. It freed people from the constant search for food, giving them time to develop specialized skills. From this stability, the cornerstones of civilization supposedly emerged. Complex societies, political hierarchies, written language, and monumental architecture. The first cities, like Uruk and Babylon in Mesopotamia, rose from these fertile plains, but much, much later. The Great Pyramid at Giza was built around 2500 BC. Stonehenge in England around 3000 BC. According to this timeline, before the dawn of farming, humans were primitive. They were small, scattered bands of hunter-gatherers living hand-to-mouth, with neither the time, the resources, nor the organizational capacity to create anything larger than a temporary shelter. Their world was one of survival, not of artistry, astronomy, or architecture.
And here is where the story completely unravels. Scientific dating of the organic material found at Göbekli Tepe is unequivocal. The site was constructed around 9600 BC. Let that number sink in. This is not a matter of a few hundred years of adjustment. Göbekli Tepe is almost 12,000 years old. It is more than 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It predates the invention of pottery, the invention of writing, and the invention of the wheel by millennia. Most critically, it predates the accepted timeline for the invention of agriculture itself. The people who built this staggering complex were, by all mainstream accounts, simple hunter-gatherers. And yet, nothing about Göbekli Tepe is simple. The 50-ton pillars were quarried from limestone bedrock, in some cases over a kilometer away. How did a society without wheels or beasts of burden transport these behemoths to the hilltop?
The stones are carved with a level of artistry that would not be seen again for thousands of years. This implies specialization. Master carvers who were not hunting or gathering, but were dedicated to their craft. Who fed them? Who housed them?
Organizing a workforce capable of quarrying, transporting, and erecting these megaliths would require a complex social structure. It requires planners, engineers, and leaders. It requires a shared belief system, a powerful religion or ideology that could motivate hundreds of people to engage in generations of hard labor. This is the very definition of a complex civilization, and it existed in a time when we are told it was impossible. Göbekli Tepe turns the official narrative on its head. It suggests that the great cultural shift, the spark of religious belief and monumental building, may have come before agriculture, not after. It's possible that the immense logistical challenge of building this cathedral on a hill was the very thing that forced the people of the region to innovate, to organize their food supply, and to eventually invent farming just to feed the workers. The temple came first, civilization followed. But the mystery deepens. After being used for over 1,000 years, the most extraordinary thing happened. Around 8000 BC, the creators of Göbekli Tepe did something inexplicable. They deliberately and carefully buried their entire temple complex. They backfilled the stone circles with millions of cubic feet of earth, rubble, and animal bones, creating the very hill that would protect their secret for the next 10,000 years. Why would a culture spend centuries building such a masterpiece only to entomb it? It is an act of preservation so profound it defies easy explanation. It's as if they were not just abandoning a site, but creating a time capsule, sealing away a message for a distant future they knew was coming.
The sheer existence of Göbekli Tepe opens the door to theories once dismissed as fantasy. If hunter-gatherers didn't build it, who did? One compelling idea is that the builders were not inventing this knowledge from scratch, but were instead the inheritors of a much older, forgotten tradition. Could Göbekli Tepe be the work of the survivors of a lost antecedent civilization? A culture that had already mapped the stars, mastered engineering, and understood the secrets of stone, but was wiped out by some great cataclysm, such as the dramatic climate shifts at the end of the last ice age. Perhaps a small group of these survivors, a priestly or scientific class, found refuge among the local hunter-gatherer populations. They may have used Göbekli Tepe as a center of knowledge, a place to pass down their sacred wisdom and astronomical observations to a new generation of humanity. The intricate carvings of animals may not just be pictures, but a symbolic language, a celestial code. Some researchers have compellingly argued that the pillars of Göbekli Tepe are an astronomical map, marking the constellations and recording a devastating comet impact event around 10,900 BC, which is theorized to have caused the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe.
If this is true, then the builders weren't just worshiping the stars, they were memorializing a world-changing event. They were telling a story of a great cosmic disaster and a time of darkness. The deliberate burial of the site then transforms from a strange mystery into a logical act. It was a way to ensure their message, carved in stone, would survive the turbulent millennia to come. Göbekli Tepe is not just a building, it's a signpost. It is physical, undeniable proof that a profound historical amnesia has afflicted our species. A vast and sophisticated chapter of the human story has been missing, and we are only now beginning to read its first astonishing words. It proves that the capacity for greatness, for monumental vision and incredible achievement existed deep in our so-called primitive past. It forces us to wonder, if a temple complex of this scale could lie hidden under a simple hill, what else have we missed? Göbekli Tepe was preserved because it was buried on land, protected by the very people who built it. But what if other, perhaps even greater secrets of this forgotten epoch were not buried under soil, but were instead swallowed by the rising waters at the end of the last ice age? What forgotten worlds might be waiting for us, silent and still, in the crushing dark of the deep ocean?
Chapter 3: Cities Beneath the Waves. The memory of a great flood is humanity's oldest and most universal scar. From the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia to the story of Noah in the Hebrew Bible, from the Hindu tales of Manu to the myths of countless indigenous tribes across the world, the story is always the same. A former age of humanity, a golden era, is brought to a sudden and violent end by a world-drowning deluge. For centuries, we have called these stories myths, allegories, warnings. But what if they are not myths at all? What if they are the fragmented, fading memory of a real global cataclysm? A memory of the day the sea rose up and swallowed the world of our ancestors. The search for this lost world, for the real Atlantis, has led countless explorers to the depths. Most have found nothing, but in a few tantalizing places, the ocean has begun to give up its dead. Our first journey takes us to the Ryukyu Islands of Japan, to the waters off the coast of a small island called Yonaguni. In 1986, a local diver searching for new shark-watching spots stumbled upon something that defied belief. There, 80 feet beneath the waves, lay a colossal stone structure, the size of a pyramid. It is a monolithic entity carved directly from the bedrock of the seafloor. It rises in a series of immense tiered platforms featuring stunningly flat terraces, perfectly parallel steps, and impossibly sharp 90-degree angles. Some sections appear to be paved stone roads. One area, dubbed the Stadium, resembles a grandstand with stone seating. Another feature, known as the Turtle, is a 5-meter-long sculpture hewn from the rock. The scale is breathtaking. The entire complex stretches for over 300 meters. It feels deliberate, architectural. It feels like a city sleeping under a blanket of blue. Half a world away, another, even more profound discovery was made. In 2001, India's National Institute of Ocean Technology was conducting a routine survey of the sea floor in the Gulf of Khambhat, off the coast of Gujarat. Their high-powered sonar equipment, mapping the seabed 120 feet down, began to paint an impossible picture. Line by line, an image emerged of what could only be described as a ghost city. On their screens, they saw the clear, geometric patterns of massive foundations, the grid-like layout of ancient streets, and the acoustic shadows of great walls and buildings, all stretching for over 5 miles. It was a discovery so vast, so paradigm-shattering, that the Indian government immediately declared it a find of national importance. 2 lost worlds, separated by thousands of miles of ocean, yet telling the same impossible story.
When confronted with such extraordinary claims, the scientific establishment rightly demands extraordinary evidence. The mainstream geological explanation for the Yonaguni monument is that it is an entirely natural phenomenon. Geologists point out that sandstone, the type of rock the monument is made of, has a natural tendency to fracture along parallel bedding planes. Tectonic activity and strong ocean currents, they argue, could have sheared the rock over millennia, creating the sharp angles and flat surfaces that mimic man-made construction. The steps, the terraces, the walls, they are all explained away as the coincidental, if impressive, result of natural geological processes. The human mind, they say, is wired to see patterns and intention where there is only chaos. It is a case of geological pareidolia. The monument is not a lost temple. It's a trick of the light, a geological Rorschach test on a massive scale. In the Gulf of Khambhat, the skepticism is just as strong, though for different reasons. The evidence for the sunken city rests almost entirely on those tantalizing sonar images. Critics argue that sonar can be misleading, and that natural formations like riverbeds and sandbanks can create geometric patterns that appear artificial. Without clear underwater photographic proof or extensive archaeological excavation, both of which are incredibly difficult and expensive in the murky, fast-flowing waters of the Gulf, the city remains a phantom. The artifacts that have been dredged from the site, they contend, could have been washed out to sea from rivers over thousands of years, a random collection of debris that doesn't prove the existence of a single coherent city beneath the waves. The official position is one of extreme caution. Until a spade can be put in the ground, the Gulf of Khambhat city is speculation, not fact. When confronted with such extraordinary claims, the scientific establishment rightly demands extraordinary evidence. The mainstream geological explanation for the Yonaguni monument is that it is an entirely natural phenomenon. Geologists point out that sandstone, the type of rock the monument is made of, has a natural tendency to fracture along parallel bedding planes. Tectonic activity and strong ocean currents, they argue, could have sheared the rock over millennia, creating the sharp angles and flat surfaces that mimic man-made construction. The steps, the terraces, the walls, they are all explained away as the coincidental, if impressive, result of natural geological processes. The human mind, they say, is wired to see patterns and intention where there is only chaos. It is a case of geological pareidolia. The monument is not a lost temple. It's a trick of the light, a geological Rorschach test on a massive scale. In the Gulf of Khambhat, the skepticism is just as strong, though for different reasons. The evidence for the sunken city rests almost entirely on those tantalizing sonar images. Critics argue that sonar can be misleading, and that natural formations like riverbeds and sandbanks can create geometric patterns that appear artificial. Without clear underwater photographic proof or extensive archaeological excavation, both of which are incredibly difficult and expensive in the murky, fast-flowing waters of the Gulf, the city remains a phantom. The artifacts that have been dredged from the site, they contend, could have been washed out to sea from rivers over thousands of years, a random collection of debris that doesn't prove the existence of a single coherent city beneath the waves. The official position is one of extreme caution. Until a spade can be put in the ground, the Gulf of Khambhat city is speculation, not fact.
The case for the Gulf of Khambhat anomaly is even more explosive. While sonar images can be debated, the artifacts dredged from the seabed are concrete. The NIOT team recovered over 2,000 objects. They found pottery, jewelry, sculpted figurines, and even human bones and teeth. And among them, they found a piece of fossilized wood, clearly worked by human hands. This single piece of wood was sent for carbon-14 dating. The result came back at 7,500 BC. That is 9,500 years old. This date is not just old, it is revolutionary. The earliest cities of Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley civilization, such as Harappa, are dated to around 3,300 BC. This single piece of wood suggests a settled urban culture in India that is over 4,000 years older than the civilization previously thought to be the first. When you combine the impossibly ancient date of the artifact with the sonar maps showing a 5-mile-long city grid right where it was found, the argument for coincidence becomes incredibly difficult to maintain. The evidence points to a massive, thriving city, now lost to the sea, which flourished during an age we once believed was populated only by primitive hunter-gatherers.
The oceans of our world may be the true keepers of our deepest history, hiding entire chapters of the human story beneath a veil of water. These submerged worlds are a testament to the power of water to erase, but also to preserve. But what if water has left its signature not only in the deep ocean, but also in the most unexpected of places? What if the greatest clue to this lost epic of high waters and forgotten rains lies not at the bottom of the sea, but carved into the most famous monument on Earth, sitting in the heart of a barren desert? There is a creature in the desert that has no voice, yet tells a story. It has watched the sun rise more than 1,000,000 times, its limestone eyes fixed on the eastern horizon, a silent, eternal sentinel. It is the great Sphinx of Giza. Part lion, part human, all mystery.
It crouches in its enclosure, a guardian of the Giza Plateau, seemingly protecting the great pyramids that rise at its back. For centuries, we have looked upon its weathered face and believed we understood its purpose. We saw it as the ultimate symbol of ancient Egypt's pharaonic power, a testament to the god-kings who built a civilization in the sand. We gave it a name, an age, and a place in our carefully constructed timeline. But what if the Sphinx is not what it seems? What if its story is not written in the hieroglyphs of kings, but in the language of the stone itself? A language of wind, sand, and water. A story that tells of an age so remote it has been utterly forgotten.
The textbook account. The orthodox history of the Sphinx is as solid and straightforward as the monument itself. For over a century, the consensus among Egyptologists has been that this colossal sculpture was created during Egypt's Old Kingdom, specifically during the 4th dynasty, around 2500 BC. The creative force behind it is credited to Pharaoh Khafre. The evidence, while circumstantial, seems compelling. The Sphinx is located directly adjacent to the causeway leading to Khafre's pyramid, the second largest on the plateau. The Sphinx Temple, situated directly in front of the monument, is built with the same style of massive limestone blocks as Khafre's Valley Temple. Most tellingly, the face of the Sphinx, though heavily damaged, is said to bear a striking resemblance to other known statues of Khafre. The conclusion, therefore, is simple. Khafre commissioned the quarrying of a massive limestone outcrop on the plateau, shaping it into a lion's body with his own face, a divine guardian for his funerary complex. It is a masterpiece of pharaonic ambition. The significant weathering and erosion seen on the monument are attributed to 4,500 years of exposure to the harsh desert climate. The primary culprit, according to this view, has been wind-blown sand, which has acted like a relentless sandblaster, scouring the monument for millennia. This is the story you will find in every museum and every history book. It is neat, logical, and fits perfectly within the accepted timeline of Egyptian civilization.
But in the late 1980s, an independent researcher and author named John Anthony West began to champion a radical new idea. He noticed something about the erosion on the Sphinx that didn't fit the official story. It didn't look like the sharp, angular patterns of wind erosion. It looked different, smoother, more rounded. To test his hypothesis, he needed an expert. In 1991, he enlisted Dr. Robert Schoch, a tenured professor of geology from Boston University. Schoch was not an Egyptologist or an alternative historian. He was a hard-nosed mainstream geologist. He traveled to Giza, expecting to quickly debunk West's fringe ideas and confirm the wind erosion model. Instead, what he found on the Giza Plateau stunned him and set off one of the greatest academic controversies of our time. When Dr. Schoch examined the Sphinx, he saw, with his geologist's eye, a truth hidden in plain sight. The erosion on the body of the Sphinx, and more importantly,
on the walls of the enclosure from which it was carved was not the result of wind and sand. The evidence was unmistakable. He saw deep vertical fissures and undulating, rolling profiles. This was, in his expert opinion, a classic textbook example of precipitation-based erosion. It was the signature of water. Specifically, thousands of years of heavy rainfall beating down upon the monument and running in sheets down its sides, scouring the soft limestone into deep channels and gullies. This geological conclusion presented a colossal problem. The Giza Plateau is part of the Sahara, one of the driest regions on Earth. The climate there has been hyper-arid for at least the last 5,000 years. There simply hasn't been enough rainfall in the entire accepted lifespan of the Sphinx to cause this type of extensive water damage. To drive the point home, Schock and West pointed to other structures on the plateau, such as Old Kingdom tombs, which are known with certainty to be 4,500 years old and are made from the very same limestone. The erosion on these structures is completely different. It shows the sharp, horizontal, wind-blasted patterns one would expect from millennia in a desert. The Sphinx and its enclosure tell a story of water. The pyramids and the tombs tell a story of wind. They stand side by side, yet they bear the scars of two completely different climates. How could this be possible if they were all built at the same time?
The paleoclimatological data is clear. For the Giza Plateau to have experienced enough sustained rainfall to carve the Sphinx enclosure in this way, you have to go back in time. Way back. You have to go back to a period before the Sahara was a desert. Between roughly 10,000 BC and 3000 BC, North Africa experienced a period of wet, rainy climate known as the African Humid Period. The Sahara was a green savanna, dotted with lakes and rivers teeming with life. For the geological evidence on the Sphinx to be correct, the monument must have been carved during, or more likely, before this ancient period of rain. Dr. Schock's initial, highly conservative estimate was that the Sphinx must have been built no later than 5000 BC, and possibly as early as 7000 BC, or even older. He wasn't guessing. He was reading the story written in the stone. Then there is the issue of the head. Many observers have noted that the head of the Sphinx is strikingly small in proportion to its massive leonine body. This is an artistic anomaly not seen anywhere else in the grand art of ancient Egypt. The water erosion hypothesis provides a startlingly elegant solution. The original monument, carved in that remote, rainy period, would have suffered from thousands of years of erosion. The head, being more exposed, would have been the most heavily damaged part. Millennia later, when the pharaoh Khafre discovered this ancient weathered wonder, he did not create it, but restored it. He had his artisans repair the water-damaged body with casing stones and recarve the original, massive and heavily eroded head into a portrait of his own face. This would perfectly explain why the head is so small and why it shows much less severe erosion than the ancient body it sits upon.
The implications of this theory are staggering. If Schock and West are correct, it doesn't just push back the date of a single statue. It shatters the entire foundation of our understanding of the ancient past. A monument of the Sphinx's scale and sophistication existing in 7000 BC or earlier implies the presence of a highly organized, technologically capable civilization thousands of years before the rise of dynastic Egypt. It would mean that the civilization of the pharaohs was not a beginning, but an inheritance. They may have been the heirs to a much older, ancestral culture that flourished during the last ice age, a culture that was all but wiped from human memory. The Giza Plateau, then, would not be a fourth dynasty creation, but a legacy site, sacred for millennia before the first pharaoh was ever born. The dynastic Egyptians may have built their pyramids there precisely because the Sphinx was already there, a timeless relic from the age of the gods they spoke of in their own myths. This aligns perfectly with the evidence from sites like Göbekli Tepe and the submerged structures off the coasts of India and Japan. It is yet another powerful piece of evidence pointing to a lost chapter in the human story. The Sphinx, then, may not be a portrait of a king, but a message from a forgotten world, written in the universal language of geology. It is a silent witness, its gaze fixed on the horizon, waiting for us to decipher its true age and origin. If such a profound secret could be hidden in plain sight, carved into the world's most famous monument, it begs the question, what other forms did this
Ancient knowledge take? If the builders of the first Sphinx had the power to shape mountains, is it possible they also had the knowledge to map the entire world? Knowledge can be lost. A library can burn. A civilization can fall. A language can be forgotten. History is a story of rediscovery as much as it is a story of discovery. We flatter ourselves with the notion that we, in the modern age, are the first to truly see the world for what it is, a sphere accurately mapped, its continents and oceans all accounted for. But what if our age of exploration was simply a re-exploration? What if the complete blueprint of our planet was known in stunning detail by a civilization that vanished from the Earth thousands of years ago? The proof for such a radical claim may lie not in a buried stone temple, but in a dusty, forgotten corner of a palace library, drawn on a fragile piece of gazelle skin. In 1929, scholars working in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, Turkey, were cataloging items in the old imperial library. Among the countless scrolls and manuscripts, they found a remarkable parchment, a map signed in the year 1513 by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Haji Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, known to history as Piri Reis. The map was immediately recognized as a treasure. For its time, it was a work of cartographic genius. It depicted the western coasts of Europe and North Africa, and the eastern coast of South America, with a precision that was astonishing for the early 16th century. It showed details of the American coastline that were at the time only just being charted by the first European explorers. The Piri Reis map was hailed as a masterpiece of Renaissance cartography, a testament to the skill of the Ottoman Navy and their access to the latest intelligence from the Age of Discovery. The historical explanation for the map's accuracy appears, on the surface, to be quite straightforward. Piri Reis was not a field explorer. He was a master intelligence gatherer and compiler. On the map itself, he left a series of fascinating notes explaining his methodology. He wrote that this chart was not his own original work, but a composite drawn from a large number of source maps. He claimed to have used about 20 charts and mappemundi, including 8 maps from the time of Ptolemy, an Arabic map of India, 4 contemporary Portuguese charts, and, most intriguingly, a map sourced from Christopher Columbus himself, which had been captured from one of his sailors. According to the mainstream view, Piri Reis skillfully synthesized the best available geographic knowledge of his day. He combined the ancient wisdom of the Greeks with the very latest cutting-edge reports from Portuguese and Spanish navigators who were pushing the boundaries of the known world. The accurate coastlines of Brazil, for instance, are seen as a reflection of these new Portuguese charts. The islands of the Caribbean are attributed to his access to Columbus's lost map. The Piri Reis map is therefore seen as an invaluable historical document, but a document of its time. It is a brilliant snapshot of the world as it was understood in 1513, a world in the process of being revealed. Any features on the map that seem to go beyond the knowledge of that era are dismissed as coincidence, misinterpretation of source material, or simply lucky guesswork.
And for decades, that is where the story stood. But in 1956, the map came to the attention of Professor Charles Hapgood, a historian of science at Keene State College. Hapgood was not a man to accept orthodoxy without question. He and his students began a years-long, meticulous analysis of the map, and they discovered anomalies so profound they threatened to rewrite not just the history of exploration, but the history of humanity. The first and most explosive anomaly is found at the very bottom of the parchment. Extending eastward from the southern tip of South America is a large, detailed land mass. For years, this was assumed to be a fanciful or distorted drawing of the South American coast. But Hapgood proposed a shocking alternative. He argued that this was a detailed and accurate depiction of the northern coast of Antarctica. This suggestion was immediately dismissed as impossible. Antarctica was not officially sighted by explorers until 1820, over 300 years after Piri Reis drew his map. How could he possibly have known of its existence? But the mystery deepened. Hapgood claimed it wasn't just a map of Antarctica. It was a map of Antarctica before it was covered by ice. The coastline shown on the Piri Reis map corresponds with startling accuracy to the subglacial landmass of Queen Maud Land. This is the true shape of the continent, a shape that has been hidden under a sheet of ice more than a mile thick for thousands of years. We only managed to map this subglacial coastline in 1958 using modern seismic echo sounding technology. Yet here it was, drawn on a piece of gazelle skin in 1513.
The second anomaly is mathematical. The map is not drawn on a simple grid like modern charts. Hapgood and his team discovered that it was a portolan chart, designed for navigation, but constructed on an incredibly sophisticated geometric projection. It appeared to be a form of equidistant projection, centered over what was once ancient Egypt. This required an expert knowledge of spherical trigonometry, a branch of mathematics that was not supposed to have been fully developed until the 18th century. Furthermore, the map seemed to display an accurate knowledge of relative longitude. Determining longitude accurately was the single greatest scientific challenge of the Age of Discovery. It wasn't solved until the invention of the marine chronometer in the late 1700s, and yet the Piri-Reis map appears to have it right. These anomalies led Hapgood to a single, radical conclusion. Piri-Reis was telling the truth when he said he used ancient source maps, but those sources were not from the time of Ptolemy. They must have been far, far older. The impossible knowledge on his map, the ice-free Antarctica, the correct longitudes, the advanced projection, must have come from a single predecessor map, a map of the entire world, created by a culture that knew the true shape and size of the Earth and had charted it from pole to pole. This ancient map was lost, but fragments of it, copied and recopied over centuries, survived in forgotten archives, like the one in Constantinople, or perhaps the Great Library of Alexandria, before it was destroyed. And the Piri-Reis map is not alone. The Orontius Phineus map, drawn in 1531, shows the entire continent of Antarctica in the center of the southern hemisphere. It not only gets the overall shape and size correct, but it depicts the continent free of ice, with mountains, valleys, and rivers flowing to the sea. The great cartographer Gerardus Mercator, famous for his world map of 1569, also included a fully formed Antarctica. Where were these Renaissance masters getting this information? They were all, Hapgood argued, drawing from the same lost ancient source. If Hapgood's theory is correct, then the Piri-Reis map is more than just a cartographic puzzle. It is a ghost. It is the surviving blueprint of a world known to our distant ancestors. It implies the existence of a civilization during the last ice age that was not a scattered collection of primitive tribes, but a highly advanced, global, maritime culture. A people who had mastered the science of map-making to a degree that we have only equaled in the last century. They knew the Earth was a sphere, they knew its precise circumference, and they charted it from the tropics to the once temperate poles. This elevates our concept of a lost civilization from one of mere monumental builders to one of scientific and exploratory genius. It provides a unifying context for the other anomalies we have seen. A culture capable of creating a global map is certainly capable of the engineering seen at Göbekli Tepe or the quarrying of the Sphinx enclosure. They would have built their cities on the vast coastal plains of the Ice Age, the very cities that now lie submerged beneath the waves. The maps are the intellectual software to the monumental hardware we find scattered across the globe. These maps are phantom blueprints of a forgotten world, suggesting our ancestors inherited a legacy of incredible scientific knowledge. They hint at a global civilization that understood the Earth as a whole, a truth that was later lost and had to be painstakingly rediscovered.
If humanity's own history is so much deeper and more advanced than we believe, it forces us to reconsider the most ancient legends of all, stories that speak not just of advanced humans, but of entirely different beings who walked the earth. What if the cartographers of this impossible world were not the only forgotten inhabitants of ancient Earth?
It is the oldest story in the world. Before the rise of kings and empires, before our written history began, there was an age of myth, an age of wonders. And in this forgotten epoch, our ancestors were not alone. From the frozen plains of Scandinavia to the jungles of the Amazon, from the sacred texts of India to the oral traditions of Native America, a single thunderous memory survives. It is the memory of a time when giants walked the earth. The Bible speaks of the Nephilim, the sons of God, who came to earth and fathered a race of mighty men of old. The Greeks told tales of the Titans, primordial beings of immense size and strength, who ruled before the Olympian gods. Norse mythology tells of the Jotun of Jotunheim, the formidable frost giants who were the eternal enemies of Odin and Thor. Every culture, it seems, has its own name for them. They are the Fomorians of Ireland, the Quinametsin of the Aztecs, or the Sitka of the Paiute. For centuries, we have dismissed these tales as campfire stories, metaphors for the raw power of nature, or perhaps the exaggerated memory of a tall rival tribe. We relegated the giants to the realm of folklore, comfortable in the belief that our human ancestors were the sole masters of the ancient world. But what if the myths are not myths at all? What if they are history, a history that has been deliberately and systematically erased?
The modern scientific view on the subject of giants is clear and uncompromising. There is no physical, anthropological evidence for a distinct race of giant humans. The thousands of ancient skeletons that have been unearthed and studied form a clear picture of our ancestors, who were, on average, slightly shorter than we are today. The stories, therefore, must have another explanation. The most common theory is that our ancestors were simply misinterpreting the world around them. When an ancient farmer's plow struck a massive fossilized bone, he had no knowledge of prehistoric megafauna. He would not see the femur of a mastodon or the shoulder blade of a woolly rhinoceros. He would see the bone of a giant man from a bygone age, and a legend would be born. Nearly every discovery of so-called giant bones that has been properly examined by paleontologists has been re-identified as belonging to an extinct large animal. In the rare cases where unusually large human skeletons are found, the explanation is medical. Conditions such as pituitary gigantism can cause individuals to grow to heights of 7 or even 8 feet. These individuals, while remarkable, are seen as genetic anomalies, outliers. They are tragic medical cases, not representatives of a lost race. And finally,
The field is notoriously polluted by hoaxes. From the infamous Cardiff giant of the 19th century, a 10-foot-tall petrified man that was actually a carved block of gypsum, to the endless stream of photoshopped images on the internet, the search for giants has been plagued by deliberate deception, making mainstream science justifiably wary of the entire subject.
If the case were to end there, we could comfortably close the book on the age of giants. But there is a second, deeply unsettling body of evidence that cannot be so easily dismissed. It is not found in bones, but in print. It is a trail of thousands of newspaper articles, town histories, and official reports from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a time before archaeology was a rigidly controlled academic profession. And they all tell the same incredible story. All across the United States, as settlers expanded westward, they began to plow fields and excavate ancient burial mounds left by the continent's mysterious prehistoric inhabitants. And time again, they reported finding things that shouldn't exist. Newspapers from New York to California, from Wisconsin to Texas, are filled with sober, matter-of-fact accounts of the discovery of giant skeletons. These were not tabloid rags, but respected local papers documenting local events. A report from the San Diego Union in 1895 tells of the discovery of a 9-foot skeleton. An 1883 report from a mound in Ohio describes a 7-foot 6-inch skeleton found wearing copper armor. A discovery in Wisconsin in 1891 unearthed a skeleton measuring over 9 feet with an abnormally large, elongated skull. The reports are too numerous to be isolated incidents. They describe skeletons ranging from 7 to over 10 feet in height. Many accounts mention unusual anatomical features, such as double rows of teeth or skulls with bony horns.
And here is where the story takes a disturbing turn into the realm of conspiracy. A distinct pattern emerges in these old reports. A group of local citizens or an amateur antiquarian unearths a remarkable giant skeleton. The discovery is a major local event, and the newspaper article often ends with the same phrase: "The Smithsonian Institution has been notified," or "An agent from the Smithsonian is on his way to collect the remains." And then silence. The skeletons are crated up and sent to Washington, D.C., and are never seen or heard from again. Decades later, when researchers inquire with the Smithsonian about these specific finds, citing the original newspaper articles, the official response is almost always the same. They have no record of such a discovery. The bones are gone. The reports are dismissed as exaggerations or outright fabrications by provincial journalists. But is it plausible that thousands of separate newspaper reports from all over the country were all lying, all exaggerating in the exact same way, and all implicating the same national institution? The sheer volume of the evidence suggests a consistent historical pattern. A pattern of discovery, followed by acquisition, followed by disappearance. It has led many researchers to a shocking conclusion that the Smithsonian Institution in the late 19th and early 20th centuries was engaged in a systematic campaign to collect and conceal any skeletal evidence that deviated from the accepted orthodox theory of human evolution and the history of North America. If we dare to entertain the possibility that these reports were true, that a race of human giants once roamed the earth, it provides a powerful, almost disturbingly simple solution to some of ancient history's most profound mysteries. For generations, we have marveled at the megalithic wonders of the past and asked, how?
How did the ancient Egyptians quarry and lift 70-ton granite blocks to build the Great Pyramid? How did a prehistoric culture in Lebanon move the 1,000-ton foundation stones of Baalbek? How did the builders of Stonehenge in England or Göbekli Tepe in Turkey raise colossal stone pillars weighing upwards of 50 tons without modern machinery? We have proposed countless complex and ingenious theories involving levers, ramps, and armies of thousands of laborers. But what if the answer is simpler? What if the builders were simply bigger? The physical laws of scale dictate that an 8 or 9 foot tall human would not just be taller, but exponentially stronger than a 5 or 6 foot human. A task that would be monumental for us would have been significantly less challenging for them. The megalithic world, with its massive, superhuman scale, suddenly makes perfect sense if it was designed and built by superhuman hands. The giants of myth were not just brute beasts, they were the master builders. They were the architects and engineers of the lost civilization, the physical power that made the impossible possible. The possibility of a lost race of giants forces us to question the very physicality of our past, suggesting that the stage of ancient history was occupied by more than just our own ancestors. The evidence, though buried in old archives and institutional denial, whispers of a world built on a different scale. If the beings themselves were so different from what we're told, what about the tools they used? We have spoken of their potential physical power, but what if they also possessed an intellectual and technological power that is just as hard for us to comprehend? A power that has left behind artifacts so advanced they seem to belong not to our world, but to the world of the gods.
Chapter 7. Technology of the Gods. The story of human ingenuity is meant to be a simple, linear ascent, a slow and steady climb from the stone tool to the chariot wheel, from the aqueduct to the printing press, and finally to the silicon chip. Each invention builds logically on the one before it. The timeline is neat, orderly, and comforting. But what if, scattered throughout this tidy timeline, there are objects that defy the sequence, artifacts so technologically advanced for their era, they are like a smartphone discovered in a medieval tomb. Archaeologists call them OOP arts, out-of-place artifacts. They are the glitches in our historical software, pieces of a puzzle that suggest a different, far more complex past, a past where our ancestors wielded a technology that in some cases we have only just begun to understand. Our story begins in the year 1000 in the turquoise waters off the Greek island of Antikythera. A group of sponge divers, blown off course by a storm, took shelter near the island. On a dive, they stumbled upon the wreckage of a Roman-era cargo ship sunk deep beneath the waves. The wreck was a treasure trove of classical art, marble statues, bronze sculptures, and fine pottery. For months, they salvaged its precious cargo. And among the treasures, they brought up a corroded, unassuming lump of bronze about the size of a large book, which was mistaken for a rock and tossed aside. It was only later, when this lump cracked open, that the world got its first glimpse of the most technologically sophisticated object ever recovered from the ancient world.
Before we delve into the mystery of what was inside that bronze lump, it's important to understand the mainstream perspective on OOP arts. The vast majority of objects presented as anomalous technology have, under scrutiny, been found to have perfectly mundane explanations. Many are simply natural geological formations that happen to look artificial. Others are known tools whose purpose has been misunderstood by amateur researchers, and many more have been proven to be deliberate hoaxes. For this reason, the academic world is, and should be, deeply skeptical of extraordinary claims. Take, for instance, the so-called Baghdad Battery. Discovered in the 1930s near Baghdad, Iraq, this object consists of a terracotta pot, inside of which is a copper cylinder. Suspended in the center of that cylinder, but not touching it, is an iron rod, all sealed with asphalt plug. To a modern eye, this looks exactly like a primitive galvanic cell or battery. The mainstream archaeological view, however, is that this interpretation is anachronistic. It's far more likely, they argue, that these pots were used for the safe storage of sacred scrolls. In this model, the copper cylinder would have been a protective case for a papyrus or parchment scroll, and the iron rod would have been the spindle it was wrapped around. Any electrical properties are purely coincidental. A similar explanation is offered for the famous Dendera light reliefs found in the Temple of Hathor in Egypt. Egyptologists, however, are unanimous in their interpretation. This is a purely symbolic, mythological scene. The bulb is an elongated lotus flower, a classic Egyptian symbol of creation. The snake emerging from it represents the creator god Harsamtus. The cable is the flower's stem, and the box is a depiction of a barge. It is not a wiring diagram. It is a sacred story carved in stone. For these specific artifacts, the mundane explanation seems plausible enough, but for the corroded bronze lump from the Antikythera shipwreck, no such explanation would suffice. For decades, the object sat in a museum, its secrets locked away. It wasn't until scientists began using advanced X-ray and CT scanning technology that the true, breathtaking nature of the device was revealed.
What they found inside was a universe of interlocking gears, a complex system of at least 37 precisely engineered bronze gear wheels, some with teeth barely a millimeter long. It was a machine. Further analysis revealed its function. The Antikythera Mechanism was not a weapon or a simple tool. It was an astronomical computer of almost unbelievable genius. By turning a hand crank, the user could perfectly model the movements of the heavens. A front dial showed the position of the sun and the moon against the zodiac, as well as the phase of the moon. But the back dials were even more astonishing. They used a complex 223-tooth gear system to accurately predict both solar and lunar eclipses down to the very hour. It even accounted for the variable speed of the moon in its orbit using a brilliant system of epicyclic gearing with a pin and slot mechanism. A feature so complex it would not be seen again in clockmaking for another 1,500 years. It charted the movements of the 5 planets visible to the naked eye. And on top of all this, it included a dial that tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. The Antikythera Mechanism, dated to the 2nd century BC, is a complete historical anomaly. Nothing even approaching its complexity appears in the known historical record until the great astronomical clocks of 14th century Europe. There are no known predecessors, no simpler devices that show a technological evolution. It simply appears, fully formed, a masterpiece of mechanical engineering that is at least a millennium ahead of its time. It is quite simply a machine that should not exist. With the Antikythera Mechanism as a proven example of lost high technology, artifacts like the Baghdad Battery and the Dendera Light deserve a second look. While the Baghdad Battery may not have been used to power a city, experiments with replicas have repeatedly shown that when filled with an acidic liquid like grape juice, they reliably produce a small electrical voltage. This low-power current would have been perfect for a process known as electroplating, where a thin layer of gold is bonded to a cheaper metal like silver. Gilding artifacts in this way was a known craft in the ancient Parthian Empire. Was this their secret? And at Dendera, while the relief is undoubtedly mythological, could it be a mythological description of a real piece of technology? Ancient cultures often explained the world through symbolism. If they had inherited a sacred object that produced light without fire, they would not have described it with the language of physics, but with the language of their gods. Perhaps they were describing a real, poorly understood piece of ritualistic technology, a high-voltage plasma tube like a Crookes tube, in the only way they knew how. The snake was the symbol of creative energy. What better way to describe the dancing plasma filament inside a glowing glass bulb? These artifacts are too complex, too far ahead of their time to be seen as isolated inventions. A more compelling explanation is that they are not inventions at all, but legacies. They are the last surviving remnants of a much older and more sophisticated scientific tradition, a tradition that understood the principles of mechanics, astronomy, and perhaps even electricity, to a degree that was lost to subsequent civilizations. In this model, the Antikythera Mechanism was not a singular stroke of Greek genius. but perhaps a later simplified copy of a far older and more complex device from this predecessor civilization. The Greek artisans were not the inventors, but the inheritors of a fading knowledge. The Baghdad battery and the Dendera light become examples of ritualistic use of a forgotten science. Later cultures, like the Parthians and the Egyptians, may have preserved the form of these ancient technologies without fully understanding the scientific principles behind them. Much like a cargo cult.
These out-of-place artifacts are the tools in the toolkit of our lost civilization. The ability to chart the heavens with the precision of the Antikythera Mechanism is a prerequisite for the global navigation needed to create the Piri Reis map. The mastery of energy, even on a small scale, hints at the capabilities that would be needed for the fine stonework and megalithic construction we see at sites across the world. These are not just curiosities. They are the keys to understanding how the impossible achievements of the ancient past were made possible. The Antikythera Mechanism is a machine that should not exist. The Baghdad battery and the Dendera light are symbols that hint at a forgotten science. These artifacts are the ghosts in the machine of history, challenging our belief in a simple linear progression of knowledge. They suggest that our ancestors may have possessed a scientific toolkit that we have yet to fully appreciate. If the technology itself was so advanced, the knowledge behind it must have been even more profound. This raises the most crucial question of all. Where did this knowledge go? And if fragments of it have survived, why is the academic world so resistant to acknowledging its existence? Who are the modern gatekeepers of this forbidden history?
We have reached a critical juncture in our journey. We have stood before the 12,000-year-old pillars of Göbekli Tepe. We have dived to the silent geometric ruins that lie sleeping off the coasts of Japan and India. We have read a story of impossible rains on the body of the Sphinx and held the ghost of a gear-driven computer from ancient Greece. We have examined the evidence for lost maps, lost giants, and lost sciences. And at every turn, we are confronted by a single, overwhelming question. If even a fraction of this is true, why is it not common knowledge? Why is this history confined to the fringes, to the realm of documentary and speculation, while our textbooks and museums remain unchanged? The answer, we are told, is simple. The evidence is not good enough. But what if the problem is not with the evidence itself, but with the system that is designed to evaluate it? What if history as we know it is not an open book, but a guarded fortress? This chapter is not about an ancient artifact, but a modern one. It is about the powerful academic, political, and cultural institutions that act as the gatekeepers of our past. And it is an investigation into the motives and the mechanisms that keep this forbidden history locked away.
To understand why these revolutionary ideas are met with such resistance, we must first appreciate the system they are trying to penetrate. Modern academia and the scientific method at its core is built on a foundation of rigorous skepticism, and this is, for the most part, a very good thing. Science is a bulwark against superstition, fraud, and wishful thinking. The process of peer review, where new ideas are scrutinized and challenged by other experts in the field, is designed to filter out weak claims and ensure that only the most robust theories become accepted knowledge. The burden of proof, quite rightly, lies with the challenger. If you want to overturn a century of established Egyptology, geology, or anthropology, you cannot do so with a few interesting anomalies. You must present overwhelming, irrefutable evidence that can withstand the most intense criticism. This gatekeeping function is essential. Without it, science would descend into chaos, a sea of competing claims where every wild theory is given equal weight. The official story of our past, the slow, linear progression from hunter-gatherer to astronaut, is the product of this meticulous, conservative, and cautious process. It is a paradigm that has been built brick by brick over generations of scholarship, and it is not to be torn down lightly.
The problem is that this essential system of defense can, over time, become a prison. A system designed to keep bad ideas out can become equally effective at keeping new, revolutionary ideas from getting in. This isn't necessarily a conscious conspiracy, but a natural, human, and institutional resistance to fundamental change. The first and most powerful barrier is what the philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn called paradigm paralysis. An established scientific paradigm is more than just a theory. It is the entire worldview within which scientists operate. Entire careers, reputations, and legacies are built upon the foundation of the existing model. A discovery like Göbekli Tepe or the geological age of the Sphinx doesn't just add a new detail, it threatens the entire structure. It suggests that the life's work of countless respected scholars may have been based on a false premise. The psychological and professional cost of accepting such a reality is immense. It is easier and far more human to attack the anomalous evidence than it is to dismantle one's own intellectual home. This psychological barrier is reinforced by a practical one, the funding filter. Archaeological digs and scientific research are incredibly expensive. That funding is almost exclusively controlled by the very institutions and universities that are the guardians of the established paradigm. A young archaeologist who writes a grant proposal to search for Ice Age civilizations in Egypt, challenging the consensus of his senior professors who sit on the funding board, is unlikely to get very far. You do not get funding to prove the establishment wrong. You get funding to add a small, incremental brick to the existing wall. This system inherently favors conservative research and starves revolutionary ideas of the resources they need to gather definitive proof. Then there is the risk of professional suicide. An academic who openly champions a forbidden idea
risks being labeled a pseudoscientist. They can be denied tenure, ostracized by their peers, and find it impossible to publish in respected academic journals. Dr. Robert Schoch, despite being a tenured professor at Boston University, faced a wave of intense personal and professional attacks from Egyptologists after publishing his geological analysis of the Sphinx. He was a geologist commenting on a revered archaeological monument, and he was treated not as a colleague with a different perspective, but as a heretic. This creates a climate of fear where young scholars with open minds learn very quickly to keep their more radical ideas to themselves if they want to have a career.
Finally, the very process of archaeology itself can be a filter. The system is designed to identify and discard anomalies. If an archaeologist digging in a layer dated to 100,000 years ago finds a finely machined metal sphere, the default assumption is not that they've found an out-of-place artifact. The assumption is contamination from a higher, more recent layer, or a trick of nature. The find is often noted and then set aside as it doesn't fit the expected pattern. The system is programmed to see what it expects to see, effectively making itself blind to any evidence that falls outside the paradigm. These systemic biases are powerful enough on their own to keep the fortress of orthodoxy secure. But is it possible that at times the suppression has been more active, more deliberate? Here we must return to the unsettling story of the Smithsonian and the giant skeletons. The hundreds of newspaper reports from the 19th and early 20th centuries, all telling a similar story of the discovery and subsequent disappearance of giant remains at the hands of the nation's most prestigious museum, are difficult to explain away as mere coincidence. If these reports are true, the motive would have been to protect a very specific and politically important narrative. The mound builder race, who preceded the Native Americans, were a constant source of fascination and debate. Some argued they were a lost European race. To admit that they were, in fact, a race of giants would have created a host of problems for the simple, linear story of the settlement of the Americas that was being solidified at the time. It was easier, perhaps, to collect the anomalous evidence and quietly file it away in a basement where it could no longer complicate the story. It was an act of curating history, not by displaying it, but by hiding it.
This motive, the protection of a simple foundational narrative, may be the key. Our modern world is built on the story of progress, the idea that we are the pinnacle of a long, steady climb from a primitive past. The existence of a sophisticated global civilization in the depths of the Ice Age, a civilization that rose to great heights and then fell catastrophically, would change our understanding of ourselves. It would suggest that progress is not guaranteed and that we are not the first. It would transform history from a straight line into a repeating cycle of rise and fall. For some, that is a truth too unsettling to confront. We have journeyed from the impossible temples of Göbekli Tepe to the silent cities beneath the waves. We have read the story of ancient reigns in the stones of the Sphinx and traced the blueprints of a lost world on forgotten maps. We have heard the echoes of giants and held the ghost of a machine that should not exist. And now we see the final barrier is not in the ground, but in the mind. The evidence is there for those willing to look, and so we are left with a final choice: to remain within the safe, well-lit halls of the official story, or to step into the shadows and ask what truly lies beyond the gates of our accepted history.
Our journey through the shadows of history has come to an end. We began with a single crack in the foundation of the official story, and in that fissure, we found an entire forgotten world hidden beneath. We have stood on a 12,000-year-old hill in Turkey, a temple built when humanity was supposedly in its infancy. We have dived to the drowned coastlines of a younger Earth, finding the geometric ghosts of cities swallowed by the sea. We have read the story of ancient reigns in the stones of the Sphinx and traced the blueprints of an impossible world on the fragile maps of Renaissance admirals. We have heard the faint but persistent echoes of giants in the archives of our own national institutions, and we have held in our hands the ghost of a machine, a piece of technology 1,000 years ahead of its time. Viewed in isolation, each of these discoveries is an anomaly, a frustrating puzzle. But when the pieces are laid bare and seen together, a mosaic begins to form. It is the faint but persistent outline of a lost chapter of the human story, a chapter that speaks of a civilization that rose, flourished, and fell during the depths of the last ice age, a culture that mastered science, engineering, and global exploration, only to be wiped from the face of the earth by a global cataclysm of flood and fire, leaving behind only these enigmatic clues. The greatest mystery, then, is not what happened in our distant past, but why we have so completely forgotten it. It seems we are a species with a profound amnesia, haunted by the ghosts of a former greatness, a greatness we see reflected in our most universal myths and our most impossible ruins. The purpose of this journey was not to provide you with a new set of beliefs, but to arm you with a new set of questions, to encourage you to look at the world and at the story of our past with fresh eyes, to never accept a story as final, and to remember that the greatest discoveries are often made when one dares to question the sign that reads, "Here there be dragons." The official history tells us who we were, but this forbidden history whispers of who we are, the heirs to a legacy we have yet to claim, an inheritance we never knew we had. The final truth is still out there, buried not only under sand and sea, but perhaps within ourselves, in the deepest parts of our shared memory, waiting for the day we finally choose to remember.